Nobody planned to spend the night in the quarry. The idea had started as a 5-minute stop. Just enough time to take a few pictures before driving back to town. The overlook sat high above one of the largest abandoned quarries in the state, hundreds of feet below. Massive stone terraces disappeared into darkness. Rusted haul trucks looked no bigger than toys. Broken conveyor belts stretched across the rock walls. Everything down there had been silent for years. Or at least, that was what everyone believed. 7 friends climbed out of 2 SUVs and walked toward the safety railing. One of them whistled. "I knew it was big, but I didn't think it was this big." Another pulled out his phone. The signal was perfect. Photos, videos, a quick group selfie. Someone leaned over the railing. Look. An old service road zigzagged all the way to the bottom. Most of the security fence had collapsed years ago. The steel gate still stood, but it hung open at an awkward angle. One of the women frowned. "I thought this place was closed." "It is." "So why's the gate open?" Nobody answered. One of the guys smiled. "Probably maintenance." "There hasn't been maintenance here in years." "How do you know?" "Look at it." Grass pushed through the cracked pavement. Small trees grew between broken concrete barriers. Nature had been reclaiming the quarry for a very long time. One of the group checked the time. "We've still got plenty of daylight." Another laughed. "What?" "You want to go down there?" "It'll take 15 minutes. And another 15 coming back." "We'll be back before sunset." Someone hesitated. "We probably shouldn't." The others looked at him. "Why?" He shrugged. "I don't know. It just feels." He searched for the right word. "Wrong." A friend laughed and slapped him on the shoulder. "You've watched too many horror movies." Everyone laughed. Even he smiled. A few minutes later, both SUVs were slowly descending the abandoned service road. The quarry became larger with every turn. The overlook disappeared above them. Then the highway. Then the radio signal. The walls grew taller. The sky grew smaller. Nobody noticed the change at first. Conversation continued. Music played quietly through one of the vehicles. Someone joked about buying the quarry and turning it into a private racetrack. Another suggested filming a music video there. By the time they reached the bottom, the place no longer felt abandoned. It felt forgotten. The engines shut off. Silence rushed in immediately. No wind, no birds, no distant traffic. Nothing. One of the women slowly turned in a circle. "I've never heard a place this quiet." One of the men kicked a loose stone. It bounced down a rocky slope. The sound echoed for several long seconds before disappearing. Everyone instinctively listened, waiting for the echo to end. It finally did. Then, the silence returned. They began exploring. A haul truck taller than a house stood beside an old loading area. The tires reached above their heads. Someone climbed halfway up the ladder before deciding it wasn't worth the effort. Nearby, a rusted conveyor belt stretched into the darkness of an empty crushing station. Broken floodlights leaned at strange angles. Old warning signs had almost completely faded away. One still barely read, "Authorized personnel only." Someone took a picture beside it. Another found an old hard hat lying in the dirt. He brushed away the dust. It probably belonged to somebody who worked here. He placed it back exactly where he'd found it. Nobody wanted to admit it. But they had all begun speaking more quietly. Not because anyone had asked them to. The quarry simply made loud voices feel wrong. One of the women looked at the time. "We should head back." Nobody argued. The group returned to the vehicles. One SUV started immediately. The second needed 2 attempts. Someone laughed. "Don't do that to us." The driver grinned. "She's old." The convoy began climbing the same road they had used to come down. The first long ramp passed without incident, then another. The quarry floor slowly disappeared below them. One of the men looked through the passenger window. "Feels longer going up?" "It is." "No. I mean, it feels a lot longer." Nobody answered. Halfway through the next climb, the lead SUV stopped. The second stopped behind it. "What happened?" The driver pointed ahead through the windshield. The road curved sharply around a wall of stone. Beyond the bend, something had stepped onto the road. Nobody could make out what it was. It stood perfectly still. Too large to be a person. Too narrow to be one of the abandoned machines. Then, without a sound, it stepped back behind the rock wall and disappeared. No one spoke. One of the passengers quietly whispered the only words anyone could think of. "What was that?" Nobody answered. The lead driver kept staring at the bend in the road. "What did you see?" He swallowed. "I don't know." One of the others leaned forward. "Was it a bear?" The driver slowly shook his head. "No. It was standing." Silence filled both vehicles. Someone forced a laugh. "So, a person?" "No. It was too big." Another friend opened his door. "I'm going to check." "No." The driver grabbed his arm. "It moved behind the rocks." "Exactly. If it walked away. There's nothing there now." Before anyone could stop him, he stepped out onto the gravel. The sound of his boots echoed against the quarry walls. Crunch, crunch, Crunch. He reached the bend, stopped, looked around the corner. Nothing. He turned back toward the others and raised both hands. See? Told you. Relief spread through the group. A few people even laughed. The tension began to disappear. Then, a rock rolled down the slope above him. Everyone looked up. Another stone followed. Then another. The man standing in the road frowned. What was Something slammed into the gravel less than 10 feet behind him. Not a person. Not an animal anyone recognized. Just a blur of impossible speed. Run! He didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted toward the SUVs. The thing never chased him. It simply stood where it had landed. Watching. The driver threw the vehicle into reverse. The second SUV backed up at the same time. The narrow road left almost no room to maneuver. Tires scraped against loose stone. Small rocks tumbled over the edge of the ramp. Hurry! I'm trying! The lead SUV completed the turn first. The second followed. Both vehicles raced back down the ramp they had just climbed. Nobody looked behind them. Not until they reached the quarry floor. The first SUV stopped beside the abandoned haul truck. The second pulled in beside it. Everyone climbed out at once. What the hell was that? I told you. I told all of you I saw something. The man who had been on the road struggled to catch his breath. It never made a sound. It was right behind me, and I never heard it. One of the women looked back toward the road leading upward. So, what now? Nobody answered. Finally, one of the friends spoke. We wait. For what? Maybe it leaves. Another shook his head. And if it doesn't? Silence. The driver who had seen it first looked around the quarry. Every road leading upward, twisted between towering walls of stone. Every blind corner looked exactly the same. For the first time, he realized something none of them had considered before coming down. The quarry wasn't just deep. It was a maze, one wrong turn, and they could waste hours trying to find another way out. Someone pulled out a phone. No signal. Another checked. Nothing. One by one. Everyone tried. Nothing. The walls surrounding them were simply too high. The world above might as well have been gone. One of the women quietly pointed toward the abandoned crushing station. Did anyone leave that light on? Everyone turned. High above the rusted conveyor, inside a shattered control room, a single yellow light glowed behind a dirty window. It hadn't been there before. Nobody remembered seeing it. Nobody had noticed anyone else in the quarry. The supervisor wasn't there. Workers weren't there. The place had been empty. Every pair of eyes remained fixed on the window. The light stayed on for several seconds. Then, without warning, it went out. Nobody suggested going to check, not anymore, because whatever had stepped onto the road wasn't the only thing that made the abandoned quarry feel occupied. Nobody moved. Every eye remained fixed on the dark control room. The light never came back. One of the men finally exhaled. Maybe the wiring still works. Another shook his head. After all these years? Nobody believed it, but nobody had a better explanation. The silence returned, not the peaceful kind, the kind that made every small sound feel too loud. One of the women looked at the remaining daylight. "We can't stay here." The driver nodded. "Agreed. So what do we do?" No one answered immediately. The quarry spread out around them like a giant bowl of broken stone. Several abandoned roads climbed toward different levels. Some disappeared behind massive rock walls. Others ended near rusted equipment. One of the friends pointed toward a higher terrace. "If the main road's blocked, there has to be another way out." The idea made sense. Quarries were built for heavy machinery. There had to be more than one access road. The group agreed to stay together. No splitting up, no running ahead. No one walking behind. For the first 20 minutes, everything seemed normal. They climbed slowly from one terrace to another. The higher they went, the more of the quarry they could see. It felt endless. One abandoned truck stood on a lower level. Another rested near an old conveyor system. Far below, their own SUVs looked surprisingly small. One of the women stopped walking. "Weren't we just down there?" Everyone turned. She pointed toward the quarry floor. The haul truck beside their vehicles. The crushing station. The loading platform. Everything looked much farther away than it should have. One of the men forced a smile. "It's just the height." She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. The climb continued. Another bend, another ramp, another blind corner. Then, they found it. An old maintenance gate, half buried beneath weeds. Beyond it, a narrow gravel road climbed toward the forest outside the quarry. Hope returned instantly. "We made it." Someone laughed for the first time in over an hour. The gate was chained shut. The chain itself had almost rusted through. One of the men grabbed it with both hands. "It'll break." He pulled. The chain snapped apart. The gate slowly creaked open. Fresh forest air drifted through. They could finally see trees beyond the quarry walls. Freedom. One of the friends stepped through first. The others waited behind him. He had taken no more than 6 or 7 steps when he suddenly stopped. Why are you stopping?" He didn't answer. Another friend walked toward him. "What is it?" The first man slowly pointed ahead. The gravel road ended. Not after miles. Not after another gate. After barely 30 yards. The entire road had collapsed. A massive section of the mountainside had fallen away years earlier. Everything beyond it was gone. A cliff stretched across the only path leading out. Nobody spoke. The hope that had filled the group only seconds earlier disappeared just as quickly. One of the women quietly sat down on a rock. So, there never was another exit. Before anyone could respond, a sharp metallic clang echoed somewhere below them. Everyone froze. Another clang. Louder this time. It sounded like heavy metal striking steel. Nobody moved. Then, another sound. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Somewhere beneath the terrace they were standing on. One step. Silence. Another step. Silence. Each one echoed through the quarry. But the walls twisted every sound. No one could tell where it was coming from. Left. Right. Above. Below. It could have been anywhere. One of the men whispered, "Don't talk." Nobody did. The footsteps stopped. Several endless seconds passed. Nothing. Then, a deep growl rolled through the quarry. Not loud, not aggressive, just close enough to tell them one thing. It knew exactly where they were. And unlike them, it never sounded lost. The growl slowly faded. Nobody spoke. The group remained frozen for several long seconds. The driver looked toward the narrow ramp ahead. "We keep moving." No one argued. They climbed higher. Every turn revealed another level of the abandoned quarry. Another rusted machine. Another empty loading area. Another wall of stone. The higher they climbed, the more exhausted they became. The ramps seemed endless. One of the women finally stopped. "I need a minute." Everyone paused. Several of them sat on broken concrete blocks. Another checked the remaining water bottles. Only 2 were left. The driver looked toward the sky. The sun was already beginning to fall. "We don't have much daylight left." Nobody wanted to continue. Nobody wanted to stay. For the first time, every choice felt dangerous. A sudden clatter echoed across the quarry. Everyone jumped. A loose metal sheet rolled across the roof of an abandoned maintenance garage before crashing onto the gravel below. Silence returned. The driver slowly exhaled. Probably the wind. No one believed him. They continued climbing. The next ramp curved around a massive wall of exposed rock. The driver reached the corner first. He stopped immediately. The others nearly walked into him. "What is it?" He didn't answer. He simply pointed. Fresh rock fragments covered the road ahead. Some were no larger than a fist. Others were the size of suitcases. A recent rock slide. The path wasn't completely blocked, but the usable space had narrowed to only a few feet. On one side, a sheer rock wall. On the other, a steep drop into the lower levels of the quarry. "We go one at a time," everyone agreed. The driver crossed first, then another. Then another. Each person moved carefully along the remaining strip of road. Mark volunteered to cross last. If anything falls, better one of us than all of us. Nobody liked the joke, but nobody argued. The others reached the opposite side. They turned to watch him. Mark had almost made it. One more step, then another. A deep roar suddenly exploded somewhere below the cliff. Everyone instinctively looked down, only for a second. When they looked back, Mark was gone. No scream, no struggle. Nothing. His flashlight lay on the edge of the road, still shining into the darkness below. The group stood in complete disbelief. "He slipped!" One of them dropped to his knees and looked over the edge. Nothing. Only darkness between the terraces. The driver grabbed his shoulder. "Get back! What if he's alive?" "Get back!" Another roar echoed through the quarry. Closer this time. Small stones began bouncing down the cliff face. Something heavy was climbing. The driver picked up Mark's flashlight. He looked once into the darkness below, then quietly shook his head. "We can't reach him." Nobody wanted to leave, but staying meant dying with him. One by one. They stepped away from the edge. No one spoke. No one cried. They simply kept climbing, each of them wondering the same thing. If someone could disappear that quickly, how many of them would still be alive before they reached the top? No one spoke for almost an hour. The only sound was the steady rhythm of their footsteps against loose gravel. Every few minutes, someone looked behind them. Nothing. The quarry seemed empty again. That frightened them more than the growls. The driver finally stopped beside a rusted maintenance sign. He studied the remaining ramps above them. There. He pointed toward the highest terrace, one more level. Beyond it, they could finally see the safety railing from the overlook where they had started. It looked impossibly far away, yet closer than it ever had before. Hope returned. Not much, just enough to keep walking. The group continued upward. Nobody noticed the movement below. Not at first. A loose stone rolled across the ramp. Then another. The driver slowly turned. The creature stood nearly 100 yards below them. For the first time, they saw it clearly. It wasn't charging. It wasn't roaring. It simply watched. Massive shoulders. Long, powerful arms. A slow, deliberate walk. Like a predator that already knew how the hunt would end. Keep moving. Nobody had to be told twice. They climbed faster. The final ramp narrowed as it approached the top. The old guardrail had collapsed years ago. Only broken concrete posts remained. One wrong step, and the fall would be fatal. The creature finally moved. Not toward them. Across them. It disappeared behind a wall of stone, cutting through ground they couldn't reach. The driver understood immediately. It's taking the shortcut. Everyone ran. Loose gravel slid beneath their boots. People stumbled, helped each other back up. Nobody stopped. The overlook came into view. The open gate, the parked SUVs, freedom. One of the women reached the top first. She grabbed the railing and pulled herself onto solid ground. Another followed. Then another. The driver turned to help the last survivor. A shadow crossed the ramp behind him. He shoved the others forward. Go! The creature burst around the final bend. For one endless second, man and beast stood only a few yards apart. Neither moved. Then, the driver climbed the last few feet and rolled onto the overlook. The creature stopped. It didn't continue. It didn't leap. It didn't roar. It stood at the edge of the abandoned road, watching. As though an invisible line separated its world from theirs. The survivors never looked away. Not until distant sirens echoed from the highway above. Only then did the creature slowly turn and disappear back into the quarry. Weeks later, heavy concrete barriers sealed the entrance road forever. The collapsed gate was replaced with solid steel fencing. Warning signs surrounded the overlook. Area closed. No entry. Unstable terrain. Visitors stopped anyway. They looked over the railing, took a few photographs, then left. None of them noticed one small detail. Far below, near the quarry floor, 2 abandoned SUVs still rested exactly where they had been left. No recovery crew ever brought them back, because nobody was willing to climb back down.